Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. The NBA free agency period has begun, and I think we're going to start with the Michael Porter Jr. trade. I didn't know if you had any initial thoughts about that with him going to Brooklyn and Cam Johnson going now to Denver.
Yeah, seeing as Brooklyn is essentially like NBA purgatory, I feel like the main side of this is the Nuggets side of it, and I think that they made out really well getting the return that they did get for Michael Porter Jr. I feel like Cam Johnson is like a player that gives a similar like play style. They both average 18, almost 19 points a game for Cam Johnson this past season. Granted, it was on the Nets. They didn't have to they were more reliant on Cam Johnson than the Nuggets will be, but like they get a player with a very similar play style, but at a very healthier cap number where the Nuggets aren't in the luxury tax anymore. They get out from that number where $17 million they're saving, and they only have to give up a first-round pick for a player with a very similar play style. Then we obviously know Michael Porter Jr. had his struggles in the playoffs, not just this season. Obviously, he was injured this season, but in seasons past, and could just be unreliable at times for the Nuggets. So if you can get a consistent Cam Johnson, I feel like this is an overall win for the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, I think as is right now, Cam Johnson is a better player. I think he's more reliable. And how much longer do you want to deal with the Michael Porter Jr. injury concerns? You already have Jamal Murray, who seems to play only about 60 games for the year, and you just hope that he's going to get right for the playoffs. Having your third best player, or wherever you want to put Aaron Gordon in that mix, for Michael Porter Jr.'s sake, like in that mold of a guy who could be injured, that's not going to be reliable. That's not what this team needs. And I felt like they didn't really have to give up a ton to go get Cam Johnson, who is an amazing shooter. And I definitely think has been in a ton of trade talks as well throughout this year. So you didn't give up a ton. And I think you're getting a guy that a lot of front offices agree can help a playoff team really get to the next level.
Yeah, and you talk about amazing shooting. Like I feel like that just those words kind of display what his potential is so perfectly because of the fact that he did shoot almost 40% from three this season, and just in general, like when you turn on the TV, you can see like Cam Johnson attacking in a lot of different ways, but his shooting, just being able to catch and shoot and kind of provide that role that Michael Porter, the void that Michael Porter Jr. might be like leaving for them, like it fills it all essentially like the exact same way, which is super nice to have because when you look at this trade, it feels like the Nets are like I just don't understand what they're doing here. Obviously, you're building for the future if you're the Nets, but only one first round pick from this trade where you lose one of your better young players and then get an aging player that also has a lot of injury concerns. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense from their perspective. And Cam Johnson is a great player, so I think that he could fit right into like that third, fourth best player role that the Nuggets kind of need. And like just gives them a very similar play style, but for again like a very healthier cap number.
It's just really good and smart roster construction because they're obviously going to have to pay some of the guys that they have on the roster, including Christian Brown, who's making $4.9 million in his final year of his current contract this upcoming season. That's going to be a substantial raise, I'd imagine. So you have to figure out a way to pay him. And I definitely think weighing your options, you got to send Michael Porter Jr. somewhere. He certainly is a loser in all of this because playing on the Nets right now with the way that franchise is headed potentially over the next couple of years, you go from a contender to one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference. That's rough. And that 2032 pick, it definitely kind of sucks that it's that far out. But that is what makes it valuable. Jokic will be 37 by that point. So you're hoping if you're the Brooklyn Nets that you have that in your back pocket. Maybe you can flip that in a couple of years when it could potentially be even more valuable and you can really start to kind of fast track the rebuild. Or maybe it's one of those assets in a situation where if the Nets get pretty decent, 29, 2030, they also have that pick from Denver and they could essentially just like skyrocket their rebuild or whatever it looks like at that point. I mean, we've seen it with other teams like the Spurs, they're still cashing in on some of the picks from the previous trades, feels like a long time ago. So it could potentially be something that they use for that, but it definitely sucks. Michael Porter Jr., kind of a reset for his career. I mean, in 3 or 4 years, I wonder if we're going to look back on this trade and say that was kind of where his career went sideways.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you looked back and this was the point in his career where it just completely took a decline because unless he's able to get back on the championship contending team, like no one really remembers what you do with Brooklyn besides maybe that team that was dancing all over the place and had D'Lo on it and a couple other stars. But like speaking of that team, I like struggling to remember, but Bruce Brown might have been on that team at some point, and I think that's an underrated pickup for the Nuggets, where they get him back on a veteran minimum contract and kind of like maybe not reconstructing that 2023 championship winning team, but like still, he gets his money from Indiana, and I don't even know if you can name the two other teams he played on since then, but if you can, it's Toronto and New Orleans, where he kind of just left and was a nobody, but got his money, comes back, and can maybe help out their team and add a little depth, because that's essentially what the Nuggets needed. They were one game away from like knocking out the NBA like champions this past season, and they had zero depth on their team. So being able to fill the void for a lesser cap number, and then also bringing back depth in Bruce Brown could be a good move for them. And shout out to Bruce Brown for being a Miami Hurricanes legend.
I just knew you were going to head there with Bruce Brown. Okay, so if you're the Nuggets, you competed against the Oklahoma City Thunder, probably just as tough, if not tougher than anybody in the NBA. I mean, I'm not trying to dog on the Pacers here. Obviously, they win 7 games. Tyrese Haliburton goes out in the first quarter. I'll give that to them. But if you're looking at it from their perspective, you probably have your best window as far as Jokic. I don't want to say in his career, but we've seen what's happening with Giannis, and we're going to touch on that later. Like, this is definitely, over the next couple of years, your best window, I think, to win a championship with Jokic, even if you have the Thunder standing in your way. So you get Cam Johnson, who's got 2 more years left on his deal, making $21 million and then $23 million. There is, there's not a lot of moves, in my opinion, that really gets me going and saying, like, this front office is definitely, this front office is changing what they're trying to do here. But after firing the GM, after firing the coach, they go around and turn a liability, based off of the contract, how much he was getting paid, and they get a shooter who is just as good, if not better. And now they set themselves up to potentially re-sign or, extend some of their younger guys, as well as compete. And right now, I think it's an amazing move. I don't know if we're handing out grades right now, but I definitely think I'd give it an A for the Nuggets. And I think the Nets aren't lost here either. I mean, it's a decent pick.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where we're at in 2032, but I think that we're not big trade graders, but you'd have to say that it looks like a good move on paper just because of like everything that we've been saying. So I wouldn't give it any less than an A, like an A minus, because of like everything. Like, it just frees up cap space, so you get a player that's similar, if not better. Everything that we mentioned, it feels like it's at least a neutral, if not a very good trade for the Nuggets.
Okay, so let's move to the NFL before we go to the NBA and the rest of free agency. Minkah Fitzpatrick now is a Miami Dolphin. I kind of just want to let you go in here and tell me exactly what you're thinking about this trade as a Miami Dolphins fan.
I'm glad that we used that clarification at the start, just in case anybody was wondering why I'm so invested in this. Minkah Fitzpatrick was a Miami Dolphin in 2018, and in 2019 essentially forced his way out of town, which was super unfortunate because he was definitely destined to become an all-pro type of player, and obviously he did on the Steelers, at the very least a Pro Bowler. He was a great safety for the Miami Dolphins, and an area where we've drafted very well, but we just lost Javon Holland, and our secondary hasn't been very good for years on end, which is why we got Jalen Ramsey in the first place, who we eventually ended up being in this trade. But on paper, I really like it, especially given the second part of this coming this morning in Darren Waller's pickup. Minkah Fitzpatrick really helps out the secondary and can provide a lot of experience. He's still a Pro Bowler. I know that a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans will tell you that he's on the decline a little bit, but we don't have anybody, especially in the safety range, where at least in this upcoming season. And then you lose Jalen Ramsey, but if you watch Jalen Ramsey closely, as you did as a Miami Dolphins fan this past season, he is showing his age a lot. When he's not holding, he's getting beat by faster guys. It feels like he is a 30-year-old cornerback, and that's really what he's showing. Minkah Fitzpatrick is still only 28 years, he's still 28 years old. So neither of them are particularly young players. But would I rather have Minkah Fitzpatrick or Jalen Ramsey right now? I'd rather have Minkah Fitzpatrick. And then Jonnu Smith, I feel like everyone's saying that it was a huge loss for the Dolphins, but those people also weren't high on Jonnu Smith coming into this past season. Jonnu Smith broke out with the Dolphins and Tua's play style this past season, but it really was Tua and Jonnu's connection that set him off. When he wasn't playing with Tua, there was a drastic decline in his production. He had maybe 30, 15 yards in games that Tua was injured, as opposed to 100+ yard games when he was playing. The checkdowns that he was able to take for longer yard games because of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill playing deeper into the secondary really helped him out. And I think that this is a bigger loss, it'll look like a bigger loss on paper, but Jonnu Smith felt replaceable, and Darren Waller has a very similar play style. And although he was retired and is an older version, I think that he provides something very similar and could be really great. And if not, our tight end room was terrible to be in with this season with like if Jonnu Smith wasn't going to be here. So we take a flyer on a Darren Waller who's probably going to play at a veteran minimum contract and could be really good, or we could just be looking for another tight end into like the trade time.
So obviously this is the second deal that the Steelers have done where it feels like they add something, but then they give something up at the same position. I'm curious as to your perspective on the Steelers as well. You're going to know more about this deal than I am. And frankly, obviously they get Jalen Ramsey. You mentioned, he looks like a 30-year-old corner out there, or a 30-year-old DB. So it's like, what exactly do you think the idea was here for the Steelers to make this kind of move? I mean, there's certainly reasons and stuff that it appears like it makes sense, but what do you think was the main reason for this?
Yeah, I mean, like I think that on paper, Jalen Ramsey is still a really good player, and obviously, like NFL GMs and NFL head coaches are watching a lot more film than any of us, so like they know. It's hard to say that they don't know the best, but like Jalen Ramsey is a really good player in the secondary, and I think that he can help out their DB room. And then you look at Jonnu Smith, and although they have tight ends already, he does bring a different element, and he almost plays like a bigger wide receiver type of role where he can take checkdowns, but he can also go out for longer routes, and is like one of like the slimmer tight ends. I feel like can really take like stuff longer than it should be. So I think from that perspective, adding a little even more depth from your tight end room and getting just a 2-for-1 in a player like Minkah Fitzpatrick, I feel like from the Steelers' perspective, he is aging, and you don't really want to overpay a aging safety in today's NFL, but like still, I don't like see it all that much. I feel like Steelers fans were also very unhappy with this move because Minkah Fitzpatrick has been good for them for what, like six years now, and like I can see the reasoning behind getting two players for one player, but I think that the Dolphins won this trade, at least like from the perspective of also being able to pick up Darren Waller at the end of it.
Does this change the way that you see either of those teams as far as being contenders? Maybe not all the way to the Super Bowl, but just their standing as far as the playoff picture.
I mean, I feel like as a Miami Dolphins fan, like over the last 20 years, you have to be like very realistic with like who they are as a team. I don't think that this makes them a championship contending team, but at the same time, we desperately needed help in the secondary. So the fact that you can bring in a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick, a leader, and hopefully can teach some of the younger guys on this team like what it means to play like elite defense, that'd be awesome. And obviously, Jalen Ramsey kind of brings the same effect, but Jalen Ramsey and the Miami Dolphins just never felt like it worked out. Like he had a very good couple weeks where he had like 2 interceptions in 3 games and was off to a hot start. But ever since, it never felt like he gained as much traction as it felt like he should have. And from that perspective, I'm not like very sad to see him go. From an offensive perspective, Jonnu Smith like felt like it probably feels like a bigger loss than it actually will be. And I think that this vaults them into like maybe a playoff position, maybe fighting for like a 6-7 seed, but I don't really see them getting out of the first round, especially like given the fact that last time we talked about the NFL, we talked about like the Steelers' chances and like what an NFL like playoffs like just looks like, you know what I mean? Where 1 through 4 seeds, it feels like it'll be the Chiefs, it'll be one of the Ravens or the Bengals, it'll be like the Texans or whoever comes out of the AFC South, and just a myriad, and the Bills, right? Like a myriad of teams that are just all like at an upper echelon level. And it doesn't feel like the Dolphins are quite on that level. And from the Steelers' perspective, it doesn't feel like that for them either.
Well, let's keep it, let's bring it back to NBA free agency really quick. The Milwaukee Bucks obviously signed Myles Turner. It was thought that he was going to stay with the Indiana Pacers, so he signs that deal. Then they waive Damian Lillard, and then Giannis says, or reportedly, doesn't really like waiving Dame all that much. First initial thoughts about the shuffling for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, I don't see how the move to waive Damian Lillard makes any sense without consulting Giannis first, at least in my opinion. He is your star player. He's the guy that you're trying to keep happy in this situation, and making a move like getting Myles Turner would you'd expect them to think that you consult Giannis first and make sure that he's okay with the ramifications that it does mean bringing Myles Turner. I understand that he is a great big man defensively, and he's one of the better big men shooting in the league, if definitely one of the best 3-point shooting big men. So you get a huge pickup in him, but does that push you over the top? Does that get you close to the top? Is probably what Giannis is thinking about. And from all the moves that they're making, it just doesn't feel like they're doing quite enough. And it feels like they're doing all they can, but it just still still isn't enough. And waiving a player like that Giannis did like in Damian Lillard, and losing that in just doesn't do them any favors. And it feels like they're getting closer to trading Giannis, which makes the move make even less sense at this point, because now you're paying Myles Turner big money for the next 4 years, and you also have an unhappy Giannis. So it feels like the reasoning behind this move is you get a tandem between them to try to see how far you can make it in the East. But now Giannis is more unhappy than ever.
Yeah, the direction confuses me a little bit, but we have a lot of teams, including the Bucks, who are about halfway into exactly where they want to be. So there certainly could be some stuff lining up. Hopefully, for the Bucks' sake, right now, with the way that it's looking, that the next step is not to trade Giannis. But yeah, no consultation, I'd imagine. If he's actually reportedly like unhappy with this move, is a little bit jarring for what they want to do. And Myles Turner, that's a lot of money. I mean, he did not play well in the finals. He had a couple good series in the playoffs. He was a part of that team, emphasis on that Pacers team. He wasn't exactly like the driving force for them. So like, that's a lot of money. That doesn't really change the trajectory of the franchise, even with Damian Lillard. So I question that a lot. And then, waiving Dame, I mean, coming off the Achilles injury, obviously he's not going to be there next year. Like what does the salary cap mean for you? Like, I'm sure there were some benefits to doing that, but it's like, if Giannis really wants to, go after this, retool, and, be serious with Damian Lillard after this next upcoming season, maybe that's the way to go. I really question it, because it looks like they're going to have to end up trading Giannis, like if he is truly unhappy, unless they make one more really big splash move. Like, they're going to have to start being aggressive. Also, we didn't even really talk about it too much, but Brook Lopez, not on the Bucks anymore, like kind of an end of an era, with them. Like, I always associate Brook Lopez on the Nets, but he spent a lot of time with the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, fan favorite guy who's been there a long time. I thought he was going to end his career with the Bucks, but anyways, it just feels like this team is going into a different kind of era for them. And then if Giannis is reportedly unhappy with one of the moves, that's a dangerous spot to be in.
Yeah, no, I think your thoughts are like kind of mirror mine in that sense. I think that you just, it's tough making this move in general, and then losing a guy like Brook Lopez, like kind of replacing him immediately. But then you just took so much to do that, and then also feels like maybe Damon and Giannis get a like reunion in Miami. It feels like that we're leading up to that, because I don't know that this is like, this is obviously like fantasy world, but like the Miami Heat have a lot to offer the Milwaukee Bucks at this point in their like tenure with Giannis, because of the fact that he is reportedly unhappy. He's been talking about trade destinations, it feels like, all offseason. Now you put him in a spot where he's reportedly even more unhappy, and these reports are happening just hours after, like hours after these moves happen. So it just doesn't look like it's a good spot. And then from the Miami Heat's perspective, like, any Heat fan will tell you we've wanted Giannis for an extended period of time. And with Khalil Ware taking another step forward, with Tyler Hero being an all-star this season, possibly, like, I don't know that you throw Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo in the same trade package, but if you're able to like ship one of them off, a couple first-rounders, that looks like a better deal than what you might get from a lot of other teams at this point. And I think that the Heat have a lot to offer, but I think that the fact that we're talking about a new signing and then immediately, like, following that, talking about Giannis trade talks is not where the Bucks wanted to be at the end of this.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of different teams that are now looking over and being side-eyeing what the Bucks are doing right now and saying, hey, look, if we can just keep a certain amount of cap situation free to be able to make a move on the fly, like, we're going to do it. Would you, if you're the Celtics, like, I mean, shoot, right? You would package something like a pick with Jaylen Brown and try to go trade it over for Giannis. Like, I think there's a ton of teams that would just say, yeah, we would blow it up. We would make a super aggressive move and try to kind of bring a face of a franchise in here and replace what we've got. Like, I don't know how many teams are going to want to be like not in the running for a guy like Giannis, because this is looking like it's heating up. Like, as long as you don't put yourself in a spot where you make a signing, or you make, some sort of sign and trade, or, you do something to your cap situation where you can't get Giannis, I think a lot of different teams are going to be in play. I don't think the Bucks want to trade him to an Eastern Conference team. I think that would be like, worst case scenario, but I think they're going to try to get the best deal for him. And, maybe you just try to use some of your cap room, and that's why you end up signing Myles Turner. He's a good big man, obviously, of course, and then you just roll with your rebuild or however you want to go about it. But I would say there aren't a lot of teams that are going to look at what the Bucks are doing right now and say, we're just going to stay on our own path. I think there's going to be a lot of teams side-eyeing.
Yeah, no, and from the Bucks' perspective, this situation, it feels like it just gets continually worse because the fact that the moves that they did make in the offseason, where they re-signed Gary Trent Jr. and Torrey Prince and Bobby Portis and Kevin Porter Jr., and now you're in a situation where all those people are aging guys at this point. You're not really getting any picks, and like obviously you can trade those guys eventually, but you're re-signing them, upping their money and their contracts, and now like you could be looking to retool in the offseason. It's clearly not what they're trying to do, but they might not have a choice like in the coming months or not the coming year. So, I mean, we'll see what it ends up looking like, but it doesn't look like a very positive situation for the Milwaukee Bucks in any sense. And it's a little bit sad to see because the Milwaukee Bucks are one of the kind of like small market teams that have just been able to compete consistently since Giannis got there. Even from his first couple of years, he's just been dominating the league with the Bucks. A like lottery pick that turned out very well for them, like one of possibly the greatest player in their franchise's history. And for it to go down like this, it just doesn't feel like exactly right, especially given the fact that they were able to extend him a couple of years back and like he felt like he was happy there. And now it just feels like they're in this weird like middle ground that like it doesn't feel like they're the most competitive team in the world. And Giannis obviously wants to compete.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, let's talk a little bit about some of the extensions that happened. We got LeBron and Shea, obviously both re-upping. Shea's getting paid a ridiculous amount. Any first initial thoughts on both of those?
Yeah, I mean the contract like breakdowns have been crazy for a while now, but man, like looking at like ESPN, I don't think that they did the full contract breakdown or like I haven't seen it yet, but man, like I just saw a caption that was saying like SGA is going to make nearly $1 million a game. Like he's up to like $78 million in the last year of his contract. That number is just so insane. I understand basketball money is like it's just like fake money at this point, but like still like for a league that's supposed to be dying, their star players being able to make $78 million a year is absolutely absurd to me. And then I think the more interesting part of this is like the LeBron situation and how the Lakers are going to handle whatever this leads into. Because obviously LeBron is known for like not opting into contracts and then signing extensions. And it didn't feel like he was going to do that this time around, no matter what, just because the fact that he is so old, he's going into year 23. But now like he's acknowledged publicly that they're building around Luka. And what does that mean? Like, are they going to be championship contenders this year? He's stated multiple times that he wants to be on a championship contending team. And does that mean that he goes on and plays another year, possibly after this year, without the Lakers, and just goes like full on ring chasing mode? Or like it just, we don't know what that means in general, because the fact that the Lakers have acknowledged that they are going to do what's best for them in the future, and LeBron wants a championship here and now because he doesn't have more than 2 seasons, like at the most 2-3 seasons, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think he has more than two. I know we've talked about this before about whether or not like he would be willing to play even beyond and try to get to like where Bryce is like, headed to the NBA. Like I don't really see that as something that he really wants to do. I think he's enjoying himself right now, and I don't see like anywhere past 2 years. And I know we've talked about that with like Steph Curry and other players. I don't think it would go any further. But to the Shea thing too, like that's so much money, and there's definitely going to be a bit of a conversation that's going to be had about like, man, these guys are getting paid a lot. At what point does the love of the game kind of fall off, if not already? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not even going to play all 82 games,
Mm-hmm.
so he's getting paid almost $1 million per year in a few years, or what, $1 million per game in a few years. It's like, is that helping or hurting the game? Obviously, these guys deserve to be paid as much as possible, but does it hurt the product in the regular season? Maybe, probably already has.
Yeah, and I just think from the perspective of what we also just roster construction, like what does that do for you in a couple years when you have a guy making $78 million in a year? Like how does that like affect like the second apron, whatever? Like I'm not a cap expert, but still feels like when you have a guy making $78 million a year, like something's gotta change. You can't have a roster as deep as the one that they have right now. So I mean we'll see how that ends up working out. But and the Thunder also have like done this rebuild a little bit too well, where they still have so many picks remaining that like they're gonna have to trade off so many of their picks for like essentially nothing because of the fact that they can't like sign all the guys they're trying to pay. And then once you can't do that, like you're gonna have to start extending some like guys like Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren. Where do they fit into this like picture in a couple of years? So I just think it's gonna be interesting to see, and I think that the OKC situation can get pretty interesting pretty quickly. But yeah, from both perspectives, I think that both of these both of these situations are going to be interesting from like the quality basketball perspective with Shea and making almost $1 million a game, and then just LeBron's perspective is always interesting, no matter who you are, what you're doing. Like LeBron is like has been the face of the NBA since essentially he's gotten there, and now he's ring chasing for one last time, like probably. And where does he go, or like will he finish it off his like career as a Laker is definitely an interesting question going forward.
All right, I think we covered just about all that we possibly could for the NBA free agency period, plus the big NFL trade that went down. Was it a couple days ago now, or was it yesterday? I think it was just yesterday.
Just yesterday.
So, yeah, just the recent NFL trade. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. We'll see you guys next time.